Am I right, sir, or am I wrong? Today, a couple topics up for you guys. We got the college football playoff. The committee's going to release its first rankings today, and I'm giving you my top 10 plus the playoff scenarios that may play out throughout the season and what is the committee going to do. Also, Willie Taggart got fired. We're going to go over that and talk about black coaches and all of that and how preseason rankings affect the college football playoff and all of those things. But we'll start at the beginning with the committee. So the committee has made a history of putting the name brand teams in the playoffs. Alabama, Clemson, Georgia, those are the teams that get talked about in the preseason. Oklahoma, since Lincoln Riley's been there, back again. These are the teams that get talked about in the preseason. And the preseason rankings have such a big effect on the college football playoff and that mentality of who should get in and who should not get in. But the reality is that this is an entirely new season. Entirely new season. Yeah, data in our mind, it affects it. Clemson just won the national championship. So if they go undefeated, it's not fathomable in our mind in a 14 playoff to leave the champion out. And mind you, I'm of that same opinion. But at the same time, we do have to take into account the data that we have now. It's just like Alabama and Clemson. Neither one has played a top 25 team, a team that's currently ranked in the top 25. And neither one of them has any quality wins. Yet, Alabama's number 2 in the AP poll. Or number 3, depending on which poll you're looking at. How does this make sense? That's why you have, in my top 10, I have Ohio State 1, LSU 2, Penn State 3, Alabama 4, then Clemson, Oregon, Utah, Georgia, Baylor, and Oklahoma. And then coming up in the rear after that, you got Minnesota, Florida, Michigan, Auburn, those teams like that. But in really, like, you have those top teams, there's those top 10 teams, and then there's everybody else. Nobody else besides those two top 10 teams, there's a big gap. But when it comes to Penn State wasn't a darling coming into the season. Had they come into the season ranked in the top 5, then they would be number 1 or 2 or 3 at this point in time. Mind you, granted, LSU has done a lot, but the most complete team in college football right now looks like the Ohio State Buckeyes. You have Ryan Day coming in to be the head coach, taking over for Urban Meyer, and he's having that Lincoln Riley effect. The team has gotten better since new leadership has changed. Same thing with Oklahoma and Bob Stoops. But this particular season, which is the only thing that matters, that's why I rank my top 10 on 3 criteria. Quality wins, dominance, and schedule played. We can't project out into what your future schedule may or may not be, because that doesn't matter. You have to take the data at the time that you have it. And I'm not going off no eye test, any of that. You have to take the data as it comes in. So after 10 weeks of college football, that's the top 10. Not based upon, how many 5 stars, how much talent do you think they have? It doesn't matter. What are the results on the field? That's why I couldn't get down with people still having Georgia in the top 10 2 weeks ago after they lost to South Carolina. Well, 3 weeks ago after they lost to South Carolina. South Carolina was 2-3 at the time and now has a losing record again. You can't just call it a blip on the radar. You have to take the data for what it is and stop trying to make teams what you want them to be or what you think they can achieve. What did they earn? So that's the top 10. But here's what's going to happen when the playoff committee comes out with their rankings today. The playoff committee, I believe, they are going to show LSU love at number 1 because LSU does, at this point in time, have the best wins. But how great are they have the Texas win, which how great is Texas right now? We're kind of seeing a little iffy at this point in time. So there's the Texas win. Then there's the Auburn win. Then you have them playing Florida as well. You're like, okay. So how good is this team really? Because the SEC gets judged against themselves, but Joe Burrow has looked really, really good. But this offense has shown against Alabama that they can be stopped because they were stopped. And if Auburn had had against Auburn, and if Auburn had had a competent quarterback, they would have won because Bo Nix has regressed. Like, yes, he's still a young quarterback, but at the end of the day, he's not ready. That's why Joey Gatewood is in the transfer portal. I don't blame him. I would have wanted a shot too. But the playoff committee, weeks and weeks ago, you had so many people saying, "Oh, the Pac-12 is dead. The Big Ten is a one-team race." Are you sure? Because right now, Oregon and Utah, if they win out, you're going to have a top 6 matchup or a top 5 matchup for the Pac-12 playoff. Well, for the Pac-12 championship. A top 5 matchup. That means, or even a top 6 matchup with number 5 and number 6, that team is going to have the momentum to then get into the playoffs. So you cannot discount that. If there's one-loss teams, the Pac-12 is getting in. Especially with a 12-1 champion if it's Utah and Oregon playing in the Pac-12 championship. So then, who else gets in? Obviously, you're going to have the winner of the Big Ten, especially if they're undefeated. Ohio State, Penn State, Minnesota. Is Minnesota the most talented out of those 3 teams? Absolutely not, but they can ruin the party. And if they win the Big Ten, after beating, because they play Penn State this weekend, if they beat Penn State and then go on, beat Wisconsin, and then play Ohio State in the Big Ten championship, they're getting in the playoffs 100%. No way, no how. Not even the committee can jerk them around there, even though they will try. You will have the argument, Alabama lost to LSU. We know Alabama's a good team. Well, how would you know that? They won't have any quality wins except for Auburn. Like, that would be it. And then Auburn would have like 4 losses at the time, maybe 5. So you got the Big Ten winner. And the Big Ten truly has the equal or better case for a 2 teams in the playoffs than the SEC does. Because if Ohio State wins the Big Ten, Penn State only has that 1 loss against Ohio State. And that's a close loss. Now you got the same situation that you have with Alabama and LSU, except for the loser of the Ohio State-Penn State game would have better wins than Alabama. They don't have Tua, they don't have Nick Saban, and the committee tends to go with those big names. But that's the truth. So going down to the SEC champion, it gets a little complicated because Georgia, Alabama, LSU could all win the conference. Granted, the SEC East is not completely dealt with yet because technically Florida still has a chance because Georgia could lose. They could lose to Auburn, but that is not a guarantee. And when Georgia could lose 2 games, which they would need to drop, but you never know. These things happen at times. So you have Georgia, Alabama, and LSU who are the likely winners because Georgia's probably going to win the East. So if Georgia loses the SEC championship, they'll have 2 losses. They're out of the conversation, nothing to talk about. But here's where it gets tricky. If you have LSU beat Alabama, and I believe that should disqualify Alabama altogether, even if it's a close game, provided that the other teams in the conversation are 1 loss. Because Alabama's schedule has been garbage. I've talked about it all year. How I would be frustrated and irritated if I were an Alabama fan. We have all this talent, and we won't play good non-conference schedules. We won't play 10 Power 5 games this season. Yet Nick Saban will get up here and tell you, I want to play all 12 Power 5 games. Well, do it. Why won't you do it? I don't understand. You're the most powerful man in the state of Alabama. You tell me you can't get schedules? Come on, man. So if you have LSU beat Bama, Bama should be completely out if it's other one-loss teams like Penn State, the winner of Oregon, Utah, maybe even Oklahoma in the conversation. They should be out. Sorry, Bama, you got to handle your business or schedule better. And then, but here's where it gets tricky. If LSU goes to go play Georgia in the SEC championship, or you have Alabama go to play Georgia, and then Georgia wins, now what do you do? Because that's going to be bad optically for the rest of the nation, because the SEC is regarded as the best conference, even though the Big Ten is so competitive right now. Because truthfully, the SEC, very top heavy, only judged against themselves. Then you have the Big Ten, who is deeper along the lines. Because the bottom of the SEC, once you pass Auburn, it's a train wreck. You have Missouri, who lost to Wyoming. You have South Carolina, who's losing. They lost to North Carolina. I mean, it gets deep. And then obviously there's Vanderbilt, there's Arkansas, Mississippi State, who lost to Kansas State, who beat Oklahoma. You see how this rabbit hole goes down? And then you have, so then if Georgia then beat LSU or Alabama in the SEC championship, you are going to have people clamoring for even 3 SEC teams in the playoffs, because the hype machine will be there and they will be behind it. You will have ESPN, who owns all the games. All the major bowl games. They're either on ABC or ESPN, all the major ones. There's a couple on Fox, but for the most part, they have the lion's share of the games. So you are going to have them pushing a narrative on television, which changes public perception, which then can give the committee a pass to do something weird, right? Other team that you gotta, the ACC has no shot besides Clemson. I already said if Clemson wins out, they deserve to be in the playoff. Yes, you shouldn't count this season, but it's kind of inevitable, right? It's kind of inevitable. Someone said people won't watch it if you have 3 SEC teams in. People will watch it because SEC fans are completely in on it. It won't draw the same national ratings because this season, the most watched college football game this year so far has been Wisconsin, Ohio State. Ohio State fans, people don't know this. They don't know that Ohio State has the biggest fan base in all of college football. The biggest. Bigger than Alabama, bigger than Florida, bigger than Georgia, bigger than any of them. Ohio State has the one that moves the needle. You write an article or you say something about Ohio State, people are going to read it. That's why they talk about them the most. So aside from Clemson, nobody from the SEC has a chance. If Clemson loses, it's a wrap. I just find it very interesting that people say that about Clemson, but then don't say the same thing about Alabama. Alabama's schedule's trash too. Think about this. If they lose to LSU and then beat Auburn, Auburn will be the only team on their schedule that they beat that is ranked in the top 25. The only team. But you don't hear that same narrative about Clemson. It's the same exact situation. And then because it's Bama. I know. Then you have the Big 12, which people have written off again. But they still have an undefeated team in Baylor. And the problem is nobody knows who's on Baylor's team. So I will help you out if you don't know. Charlie Brewer, quarterback. John Levitt, Michael Hasty, running backs. Denzel Mims, Tyquan Thornton at wide receiver. I mean, come on, man. That is the truth. Oh, great point somebody brought up. I'll get to it in just a second. So if you have Baylor went out. And if they beat Oklahoma, or Oklahoma then turns around and beats Baylor, and then plays them again in the Big 12 championship, guess what happens then? So now you have Oklahoma who can be back in the conversation, Or you would have Baylor, who beat Oklahoma twice and is undefeated. But then they're going to get left out of the playoff again for a one-loss team? Come on, man. Like, what are we doing here? I'll get to the comment. Someone said, how is Oregon's resume not good enough with a close loss to Auburn? They beat Auburn up except for the last 9 seconds of the game. Offensive play calling was way too conservative. They were missing 5 starters in the game. 5. And they lost the game in week 1? Yeah, a lot of other teams would get benefit of the doubt and improving throughout the season. I wonder why. Maybe a little East Coast bias. Maybe a little SEC love and propaganda. Well, that's what we got for the college football playoff. Like, you cannot discount Oklahoma. And what about Utah? If Utah wins the Pac-12 championship and they beat Oregon, who would then be 11-1, Utah has to get in the playoffs, because that is going to, I already said it earlier, it's going to be a 5 versus 6 matchup, or a 4 versus 6 or 4 versus 5 matchup. So how can you leave a team that has a top 5 win in the last week of the season out of the playoffs? Come on, man. Come on in. The water's warm. So I do my power rankings based upon schedule, dominance, and schedule play. Those are the only things that matters. Those are the only thing that matters. Oh yeah. And then, if Tua is out, they're gonna get the benefit of the doubt. Come on, man. Next thing up. So Willie Taggart just got fired. Willie Taggart got fired at Florida State. Couple people asked me about that, so I'll deal with this. So the truth is, black coaches don't get the same shot and the same rope necessarily as other coaches do. This is a fact. We don't have to argue about it. But should Willie Taggart have been fired after a season in whatever at Florida State? A season in 7, 8 games at Florida State? The answer is yes, because they wanted to fire him. But the truth is that he inherited a bad situation at Florida State. Jimbo Fisher stopped recruiting. Things were in shambles. Offensive line was awful. All of that. I'm in 100% agreement with that. But the problem is this. When you are a team who is bad and a new coach comes in, he has to establish the culture. That means that even if you're still losing, the team should be looking a little bit better. And what that means is discipline. That means lining up in the right place. You don't have dudes turned around the wrong way because they're like, there's no way that this is even possible that I would even think to do this in my brain. That's where Florida State was at. They're not moving in the right direction. So do I blame them for firing Willie Taggart? No. How can you? The results are on the field. They keep blowing second half leads. The scheme doesn't seem to be better. They're still they were last in the nation in penalties last year. They're probably last again this year. That's where teams and fan bases get frustrated. Florida State has no clue how to lose. No clue. They haven't. Think about it. When Jimbo left, they hadn't fired a head coach in 43 years or something like that. Well, actually 40, 42 at that point in time. Hadn't fired a coach in forever. They had been winning. Tops in recruiting every year. They have no clue how to lose. So here is the truth about Willie Taggart is this. I wanted him to succeed. I think that he can be a good college football coach. Problem is this. He ran into a situation where he was not ready to be that coach. He got fast-tracked through coaching. He was at Western Kentucky. Then he went to South Florida, goes to Oregon. He hasn't coached a bowl game since 2015. Didn't even know how to get a team ready for a bowl game. So when you are like he's been 1 foot out of the door at his last few stops all the time. So when you do that, you miss some of the steps and lessons along the way that you need to learn. Yes, Florida State did want to rebuild in an hour. 100% agree that they were way too impatient. But at the same point in time, there were metrics and things along the way that they were not improving. Weren't improving in penalties, in discipline, because even if your team is short on talent, you can line up in the right place. You can be disciplined. You don't have to make all the plays, but guess what? You can have a culture around, and there are a bunch of things that are unconfirmed that I have heard that were going on behind the scenes that may even affect Willie Taggart's buyout. That the school will now be trying to negotiate with him about his buyout. Come on, man, because they're trying to, like, they can't fire him necessarily for cause, but they're like, we got some reasons though. So maybe let's negotiate this $17 million. Think about that. But Willie Taggart is a situation where he is a guy who can be a good coach. But this is a time. No, I did not see the post from the player's mom. Send it to me on Twitter, please, at George Reister. This is a situation to where if you are a person, sometimes your gifts, talents, abilities, and situations put you in places that you're not mentally, spiritually, emotionally, or even like have the experience for just in general. And that's what happened to Willie Taggart. He's a good coach. I expect him to be coaching somewhere else. Get to a group of 5 team. Maybe he replaces Charlie Strong in South Florida. Come back. But the thing is, people are going to be scared. He's going to be ready to walk out the door all the time. He's got to be humbled and listen and learn the lessons that Lane Kiffin did not learn. This is the same thing that Lane Kiffin went through. Jumping from job to job. You don't get all the lessons along the way, and then you fail. Doesn't mean you're not a good coach. Doesn't mean you're not an offensive genius. Doesn't mean that you don't have value to add. You just weren't ready for the position that you ended up in. But does anybody blame you for taking that? No, hell no. If you offer me $30 million to go be the Dolphins head coach right now, to go be the Jets head coach like Adam Gase, then I'm going to take it. Freddie Kitchens, I'm going to take it. And I'm going to fail. And guess what? It's going to be okay. But how does this relate to black coaches? No, Penn State will not be upset on Saturday. How does this relate to black coaches? Because you see in the NFL, so many black coaches are in a situation where they're like, oh, I have to be twice as good. I don't get the same opportunity or the same leeway as some white coaches do. This is the way they feel. But here it is. I want you guys to hear this, because the Rooney Rule in the NFL, which they're trying to put the Eddie Robinson rule in college football, minority coaches have to be interviewed, minorities, women, not just black, but all coaches. Here is the thing that people don't really realize. A lot of black coaches get pushed into defensive roles, defensive backs, defensive coordinators, all that stuff. There's a trend in the NFL and in colleges not to hire defensive guys, to hire offensive guys. Okay, so why don't you hire black head coaches, blah, blah, blah. Think about 15, 20 years ago. There weren't very many black head coaches. Black quarterbacks in that were regarded as really good passers, all of this. And then those guys had to when you look the last 15 years, so many more black quarterbacks, great passers, the Deshaun Watsons, you have all these guys. Even you have Byron Leftwich, who's an offensive coordinator down in Tampa Bay right now. You have those guys. They turn into, those black quarterbacks, turn into black quarterback coaches and coordinators, which will then be head coaches. That's how you fix the problem. Like, people want instant fixes. And yes, the NFL is a good old boys club. Coaching is as well. But that's where it stems from. There's a shift from offensive head coaches to defensive head coaches, and there are less of those who are minorities because less of those were quarterbacks in college or in the pros. But now you see so many in the NFL. You got Deshaun Watson, Russell Wilson. I mean, just so many, Lamar Jackson, so many of them. Those guys, and even their backups, they're going to be coordinators and quarterback coaches in the future. And then those will be the head coaches that you see. This is the way it works. I didn't make it this way, but the league is a copycat league. You have Cliff Kingsbury. That's how he got a job. He failed up so amazingly. He needs to write a book about upward mobility. But that's why it works. You see Sean McVay, young head coach, gets a head coaching job. Then what happens? Kyle Shanahan. This is what happens. Oh, and the same could be said about Kellen Moore. Yep. Kellen Moore with the Cowboys. Their offensive coordinator. Same exact situation. These are the things that happen. Quarterbacks turn into quarterback coaches who turn into coordinators who turn into head coaches. That's the way it works. And yes. Oh, but how about Chip Kelly? How about Scott Frost? Chip Kelly is a different situation. Chip Kelly bought him. He gets more goodwill and more rope and leniency. Even though UCLA is trending in the right direction right now, they still got a shot in the Pac-12 South. His team is trending in the right direction. They're playing better. You see growth. And he's also been a very successful head coach in college. So guess what? He's going to get more rope than Willie Taggart, who's never had a 10-win season, never won a bowl game. And team looks like a disaster. How about Scott Frost? Scott Frost went back to his alma mater where he won a Heisman Trophy. He's going to get more goodwill. But I'll tell you this, let Nebraska not go to a bowl game this year and next year, Scott Frost will be out of there too. That's the truth. Willie Taggart had not built up enough goodwill in college football to give him a longer rope. You guys, thank you guys. I'm George Reister. Reister Wrong. Every Tuesday, around 10:30. Make sure you guys catch it. Share it with a friend. Tell a friend about it. Peace out. Catch you guys later. Actually, might catch you after the committee.